I really feel for the guys that lose their life savings in Thailand, and I must admit that the same could have happened to me if I didn't catch on to what was actually happening just in the nick of time. It was a scary ride along the way, many ups and downs, and there were times when I started to think that I was cursed. I want to say straight away that Thailand is an amazing country, but it got to the point where I was so confused and disappointed about what was going on that the allure of Thailand completely wore off. I want my story to be a warning to people. I think that even when people are being very careful, things can still go wrong. And if I wasn't switched on and understanding of the situation, I too would have just been another statistic to add to the huge list of guys who lost everything in Thailand. I was from Australia originally, but lived most of my life in the UK, and I hold citizenships of both of those countries, something that I'm thankful for every single day. I had quite a good life. I don't have much to complain about from the time when I started working until the time when I stopped working. Although I didn't save quite as much money as I would have liked, I still got into a position where my retirement in Thailand was a given. And that's the thing. I've heard lots of stories where guys did have enough money to retire and have a good life in Thailand, but they made decisions based on the understanding that the people they were doing things with had the same shared dreams and life goals. I went into it thinking the same thing, and it took me a while and quite a bit of lost money to understand what was actually going on, and I managed to turn things around and save myself from complete ruination, and that I'm eternally grateful for. The fact that things could have turned out so different, though, that still makes me feel scared today, about just how quickly things can start to unravel and go wrong before you even know what's taking place right in front of you. I wouldn't even say don't bother retiring to Thailand because you could have a good time there. All I would say is understand that most people are not going to give a damn about you when you're there. And if you know that before going in, you're more than halfway there to a successful retirement. I didn't know that until it was nearly too late. I'm just going to get straight into the situation and go over how it unfolded and how I started to notice things almost straight away. Things that I overlooked initially, but the more they occurred, the more it became clear to me that this wasn't a relationship like I thought it was. It's quite difficult to come to terms with it, really, because I can't understand why anybody would behave like that. I looked at it in a very plain and basic way. As far as I was concerned, I was in love with someone who I thought was in love with me, and who saw the fact that I was able to take care of her as a positive for her, and therefore she would understand that doing things my way would be better for her future. She didn't see it that way. She thought that she had the best ideas. She thought she knew what the right thing to do was, even though I met her in a bar in Bangkok. And, in my opinion at least, the very idea of her being there in the first place meant that she wasn't capable of doing anything else for herself, because if she was, she wouldn't have been there in the first place. So yes, I did meet her in a bar. In fact, it was the little bar just outside Nana Plaza. You probably know it if you've walked down Soi 4 before. When you turn left into Nana Plaza, on your left before going in there's that little bar. That is where I met her, and this was in 2014, when I had just moved to Thailand to begin my retirement. It wasn't my first time in Thailand, and I'd been there and done that quite a number of times, but because I was on holiday before, I never considered taking things further and having a serious relationship, because I knew that would entail me having to send money from my own country to Thailand to look after her. I was also not under the illusion that if I did meet a girl like that, and she promised that she would stop working in the bar when I wasn't there, I knew that wouldn't happen. But because I was now retired and living permanently in Thailand, I was prepared to see where this relationship would lead to, because I must admit that I did like her a lot. I'd been in Thailand for about 6 weeks when I met her. I'd already got my retirement visa. I was 55, by the way. I had already rented myself a place to live in Tong Lo, And I felt like at this point I was already getting used to life in Thailand, and I was having a very good time. I did like to go to the bars quite often, but I wasn't an everyday sort of person. I was okay with once or twice a week, and I liked to go to different spots around the city. Sometimes I liked that kind of thing you get at places like Nana Plaza, and sometimes I liked to go more local sorts of places, the sort you get around Ratchadar. And all in, I was very happy with the decision I made to move to Thailand. It was a Friday night, and I left my condo around 6 p.m, had something to eat at a local Thai place not too far away, and then I jumped on the BTS and made my way to Nana, which was only a few stations away. I went first into a bar on Soi 8, had a few beers in there, and then I made my way to Soi 4, having one beer first at a different bar before next going to that place where I met her. When I walked in, it was already quite busy, I guess around 8:30 p.m. or so, and I took a seat quite far into the bar, but you could still see Nana Plaza from there, and I glanced around and noticed her. We caught eyes, and I did what you always did. I raised my eyebrows as if to indicate I would be interested to have a drink with her. She came across, held out her hand, and we shook hands and did the usual introductions. I don't know what it was about her that I found attractive. I mean the fact that she was attractive for a start, but also it was a lot more of a relaxed type of affair as opposed to some of the other situations that I'd been in the bars in Thailand. I'd say we had about 5 or 6 drinks each, and I wanted a game of pool, so I took her out of that bar and we walked a bit further up Soi 4 to a place to play pool. She was quite good, and I must admit I always took that as a bad sign, which meant that she'd played a lot of times before, but I didn't care. I was good as well, and it was fun to play. We must have played 10 games, had 5 or 6 more drinks, and finished the night in the normal way. That was how it began, and when she left the following morning, I gave her my number because I thought about seeing her again, but I wasn't interested in continuing to go back to her bar. I said I'd like to meet her again, but it would have to be out of the bar, and she said she would get in touch with me. But honestly, I didn't really believe her. About 5 days go by, and I'd already completely forgotten about her. And then, one evening, I got a call, and it was her, asking if I remembered her. I did remember her when she told me who she was, and I thought how interesting that she actually called me. I guess it must have been a quiet night at the bar, and she asked me what I was doing and if I would like to go out with her to have a drink. I wasn't doing anything else. I'd actually just sat down to watch a film, but I thought, why not? I'm retired, I can do what I want when I want, so I arranged to meet up with her. We actually met at a little market in Odd Nut. She said that's where her room was, and she said she wanted to introduce me to a side of Thailand that I hadn't seen before. I mean, I had been to places like that countless times before, but I think she just assumed that I hadn't, so I went along with it. About an hour and a half after she called me, I was there with her, having a beer, and that beer turned into more beers, and then it turned into a meal, and I just completely let my guard down and started to relax and enjoy myself with her. Because she called me, that must mean something. I thought it did, and it was clear that she wasn't expecting anything from me by me meeting her for a drink and something to eat. I think, if I actually think hard about it, that perhaps she was using that tactic to appear like she was a real girl who wanted a proper relationship with somebody, instead of somebody who was just after money and a better life at the expense of a partner, as opposed to at the behest of a partner, which is what I thought the whole situation was actually about. We left the market and she took me to a very local style place about 10 minutes away. I loved walking around different parts of Bangkok that I'd not been to before, and this little bar was great. Tucked down some back alley, no other expats in sight, affordable beers and a great atmosphere. And we spent a number of hours there, probably getting way too drunk. I was getting tired and ready to leave, and she asked if she could go with me. Before, I'd only been with her to a hotel because it was easier than going all the way back to my place, but I thought I would actually take her to my place because I'd never done that before with anybody. And the night unfolded. I think it was that evening I spent with her and that night that we had together that appeared like this was a candidate for a proper relationship as opposed to being anything else. It was the fact that she called me, didn't expect anything from me, and appeared to really be happy in my company. That was enough for me to start loosening up and actually thinking that I could make something more out of this. The following morning, when she left, I sat there and thought to myself that this was something that I may want to continue. I actually had a smile on my face for the rest of the day, but I was also quite down about the idea of her still working in the bar and getting up to all kinds of things that I wouldn't want somebody that I liked to get up to. I knew that all I needed was to play it cool and not come across as being too keen. I wanted her to be the one to initiate things because that would indicate to me that she was serious about me and not interested in what I could give her. I didn't have to wait much longer. She called me the same day, 3 p.m, saying she had a good time the night before and she didn't really want to go to work that day. She said, though, that she needed to and she couldn't really afford not to go to work. But if I helped her to pay for the bar, then she could come and see me because she really wanted to see me. So I thought, what was 500 baht? I might as well, and I said, fine, let's meet up that evening too. Because she picked the night before, I paid, of course I did. It was now my turn to pick, and I decided I was in the mood for something a bit more substantial than Thai food. So I took her to a great Italian restaurant on Soy 11. It's been there for a long time, and it really is a great place. And there we shared a bottle of wine, had a great meal, and we left to have more drinks somewhere else. I wanted to play pool again, so we went back to that same place we played pool at the first time. And by that point, we were both quite drunk, and again, we finished up the night at my place, and the following morning, I was starting to feel like I could get very, very used to this. She was everything that I was looking for. Everything I was looking for in a partner, because I wasn't necessarily in the market for a partner, for a lack of a better term, but if the opportunity arose, I would grab it with both hands. The following morning, though, I wanted to spend more time with her. I didn't just want to see her occasionally, I thought let's spend a whole week together. And on the spur of the moment, I asked how she would feel about spending a week with me on Koh Samui. I hadn't had a break away from Bangkok since I arrived and I was due one, so why not take her with me? She was delighted at the prospect and I agreed to pay the bar so she didn't need to go to work. The time I spent with her on Samui felt like we spent a year together when it was actually only a week. For the whole time she never asked for anything from me, we just connected. At least I thought we did, in a way that I would have expected a normal relationship to begin. I went from liking her and spending a bit of time with her to actually thinking that I wanted to make this more permanent. Now, you have to understand why many guys, at least guys that get into relationships with girls that work in the bars, you have to understand that they choose to progress with the relationship a lot quicker than normal. You think about it and you understand why. They take things to the next level a lot quicker than normal because the alternative would be her continuing to work at the bar, which would mean it wouldn't be the ideal situation. I felt like I liked her enough to ask her to move in with me. I know, though, that would mean I would need to support her, and it was very soon. But I'd already found that at that moment in time, she was sending about 10,000 baht every single month back up to her family in Isan. She had 2 kids there as well as her parents who needed looking after. Because of that, I agreed to replace that and also give her 5,000 a month on top, because it wasn't a lot of money for me and it meant that she didn't need to work anymore. Therefore, she could spend her time with me and we could continue where we left off on Samui. When we got back to Bangkok, I helped her take her things from her small room in On Nut to my condo, and she began living with me like it was the most normal and natural thing in the world. I get it. When you start living with people, that's when you start to notice things about them. But at this point, I hadn't noticed anything untoward about her behaviour. She was just acting exactly like she was when we met. She wasn't asking for anything on top of what we'd agreed to, and while I liked her, I didn't yet feel like I was in love with her. If I'm thinking about it, the sense that I wasn't in love with her, which is why she wasn't pushing for anything so soon, I don't know if I'm being too skeptical, but that is exactly what it actually feels like. The next 3 months of our relationship were amazing. I was giving her the $15,000 a month as agreed, and she wasn't asking for anything else. And by month 3, that's when I started to have even stronger feelings for her, and I will admit that yes, I did start to love her. During those 3 months, we spent all of it in Bangkok. I was able to continue with my life in the same way when she was with me. And when we went out together. If I didn't want to go out, we would stay in, and she was amazing. During month 4, that was the first time she asked for something over and above what we'd agreed to. I still can't understand exactly what it was for, but something to do with some school trip that one of her kids had to go on, and it was only 1,000 baht, and because we were quite close to the end of that month, and she'd already spent her allowance, I agreed. What was an extra 1,000 baht? Another 2 months go by, and that's approaching 6 months of us being together, and I started to feel like my life would be completely empty without her. That was when we started talking about getting married. The idea behind it was that, at least in my mind, I was a lot older than her, and because of that, and because I didn't have any of my own kids, if something happened to me, I would want to make sure that she was okay. I got to that level of feelings for her that the thought of something happening to me and her being left with nothing really made me feel upset. So that was the idea of getting married, mainly for her long-term benefit, but also just to do the thing that I'd never done before in my life. I'd been close to getting married before, but I'd never actually tied the knot, so this felt like I was ticking off another item on my life to-do list. We planned that we were going to have the ceremony around Thai New Year, or about a week before, and that would be my first time going up to the village, and also my first time meeting her family and her kids. We thought it would be good to also spend the New Year there so I could get to know the family a little better. Thai New Year, known as Songkran, was 3 months away, so during those 3 months everything was great. There was one time when she asked for more money on top of her allowance, but this time it was only 5,000 baht, and because it was such a marginal amount of money, I just gave it to her. I can't even remember what it was for. I think, as you can see, there was nothing to indicate that this relationship wasn't anything other than a real one. During the first 3 months, the only thing extra I'd given to her was about 6,000 baht total, and I was fine with that. When it was finally time to go up to her village to have the ceremony, we went a week before so I could acclimatise to being there. I'd never been to rural Thailand before, and I'd heard from lots of guys how different it was to Bangkok. It was a lot more like old school Thailand. And while they still had the modern conveniences such as running water, electricity, and even high-speed internet, the ways of the people there were different than the ways of people in the city. But that could be said about anywhere else in the world. I thought I was prepared for what I was in for, but when we arrived, I was taken aback by just how different it was. I'm not saying either a good or a bad way, but for me, I definitely couldn't have spent longer than a few weeks there, which is how long we needed to be there for. I was considerably older than my wife-to-be, but one of the things I said to her very early on was that there was no way I would be paying for any money to her family to get married. She agreed to that, and her family did as well, because it just didn't make sense handing over money to her, especially because she already had kids. I get it. If she'd never had a boyfriend before, then it would make sense, but in this situation it didn't make any sense whatsoever, so there was no way I was going to pay it. I thought the fact that I refused to pay this before we even talked about getting married was a sign that she respected my way of doing things, and that she also thought it was an antiquated and out-of-date practice. If I think about it now, I think it was just her way of trying to convince me that she was the way I wanted her to be, long enough until it was too late for me to actually say no to the requests that would start coming not too far away from our marriage. That's the thing. I don't know if that was the case or not, but that's actually what it felt like. But up until then, there was no indication that there was anything wrong, that's something that she even considered. Everything went well with the ceremony. I did pay for the ceremony, but that was expected. I didn't mind that because I could actually see it in front of me what I was getting. Food and drink and entertainment for probably 75 people. So I had absolutely no issue with paying for that. After the wedding was finished, we had the new year there. It was a very different experience to how it was in Bangkok. Although they still have the water throwing festivities, it's not quite as extreme as you will find in the city. From there, we returned to Bangkok and registered the marriage. I had to use the help of an agent to do that because I couldn't be bothered to do all the back and forth to get the required documentation, and I thought it was 6,000 baht well spent. Then it was time to go on a honeymoon. At this point in my life, I had never been happier. I had a great wife, I was in love with her, she loved me, at least I thought she did, and I felt like this was going to last until I died. I thought it was quite apparent that when I did die, she would be left with all my stuff. So whether it was 10 years or 20 years or however long it was, that would eventually happen, because I wasn't about to run out of money, because my investments were more than enough to cover our day-to-day living expenses without me having to dip into the principal. I was open to the idea, although I never did, of purchasing a condo in Bangkok and making it like a real home, but yes, we never got round to that. I hadn't spoken to my wife about that as well because I didn't want to put any ideas there. For our honeymoon, we went to Phuket. I'd never been there before, and I thought it was worthwhile going for a look around. And while it was a very beautiful part of the country, the beaches were incredible, the sea was even more incredible, I didn't really feel it in Phuket like I did on Samui when we were there. However, we had a great time. It was a great introduction to married life, and I couldn't have been happier. I thought she couldn't have been any happier, and I expected that this is how our life would continue, because why would I think otherwise? When we got back to Bangkok, I told my wife that I was going to up her allowance from 15,000 to 20,000 baht. Because we were married, I thought it was only right to give her a little bit more money, and I could afford it, and she seemed to be very grateful, and it didn't appear like she was going to ask for more than that. As they say, all good things have to come to an end, because it was only a month after we returned to Bangkok when she said that it was time to pay for the school fees for her kids, and usually she saved up a bit of extra money to pay for them, but because she'd been with me now for a long time, she hadn't had the chance to do that. So she needed 30,000 baht to pay the school fees for both her kids. I wasn't expecting her to come to me with this request because, as far as I was concerned, I was giving her enough money, especially since I'd upped her allowance so that she was able to pay for her own things. But she said that she needed this as an extra, and she said that she expected me to pay for this every single year moving forwards. It was 30,000 baht, so I thought okay. I wasn't expecting to have to pay this, but again, I could afford it. So what was 30,000 baht? It's not going to cause me any financial issues or stress or worry or anything whatsoever. And I was married to her. She hadn't really asked for any money before, apart from a little bit. So I agreed to give her this money on the understanding that, out of the allowance I gave her, she would have to save it for next year. She said okay, and I paid the school fees. Only a week later, she came to me again, saying that she also needed new uniforms and school supplies and books, and for both of them, that was going to be another 10,000 baht. So she asked if I could pay that as well. I wasn't cross with her, but I was thinking I better give it to her because I don't want to cause any problems for only 10,000 baht. But when I thought about it long and hard, that was 40,000 baht. If that was going to be the case every single year, what would be better is if I upped her allowance so that I would never need to come out of pocket again over and above what I was giving her. I explained this to her and talked about it and said to her that I'm happy to give you 25,000 a month as an allowance, but you've got to save for this expense next year, and I'm not going to be able to give you more money on top because I need to have a budget and I need to stick to it. She seemed very happy with this idea and agreed, so from the following month I started giving her 25,000 a month. It was only about 20% of my monthly budget, so it was affordable without me dipping into principal, and I was happy to do it because yes, she was my wife, I wanted her to be happy, and I wanted her to be able to pay for the things that she needed to pay for. I didn't want to be unreasonable, and I thought this was a very kind thing to do. I think this is the point in the relationship where many guys, who perhaps weren't as wary as I was to start with, how rightly or wrongly, or whatever the understanding that they had, they believed it was real and genuine because there was nothing that happened during the course of the start of their relationship, even if it lasted for over a year, to show them what they thought was wrong. For me, this was the point in the relationship when I was the happiest. I felt like I found someone who understood me. I felt like I understood her, and I thought we were a team building a good life together. While I was giving her more money than I was before, I was okay with that because she was my wife. It was an agreed upon allowance that I offered to her to make sure that she didn't come to me for more money on top ever again. And because she agreed, she promised she wouldn't. And true to her word, over the next 3 months she didn't. Until she did. I am aware that there are times when emergencies can happen, and there are things out of her control that she might need money for. I do get that. And when she came to me asking for some money to help pay for her father, who had borrowed some money against his land, if I didn't pay it, he'd lose the land, I felt like it was something that I was prepared to make an exception for, even though it was 250,000 baht. It was worded to me in a way that I would get the money back eventually, even if it was only 2,000 baht a month, and I didn't really want her father to lose the land. So I agreed on the principle that the land would be transferred to my wife's name, so that he wasn't able to do it again. I thought everything was agreed. I mean, it was 100% agreed. So we went up to the village together, I gave this money to her father, and we returned to Bangkok. The land got put on her name, and I thought it was okay. I made it clear that this was just a one-off and I wouldn't expect her to come to me for money anytime soon, because that was a lot of money. It came out of my own emergency pool, and it was still topped up with enough money where I wouldn't miss it, but it was still an amount of money that I felt a bit uncomfortable about handing over. The idea of the land going onto my wife's name was just to make sure that he didn't do the same thing again. So while I'm thinking, on the one hand, I don't want to give her this money because it might embolden her to ask for more, on the other hand, I'm thinking this is for her family and let's just pretend like we're buying the land instead. That's how I reasoned it with myself. But again, other guys who were in love, I was in love with her, may have given the money without any stipulations and may have thought about it for what it was. I did think that this was too much to give, but it was a one-off. The problem, though, with one-offs are how many of them in a row can you have until you realize that perhaps these are not one-offs at all. To some people, many people, they have to run out of money until they finally realize. But I knew I wasn't going to let that happen. But I must admit that she played it very well because she knew me. After I paid for the land, we'd been together for a while at this point, and I wasn't expecting her to come to me with any other requests, and she didn't for a while. I needed to go back to the UK to sort out some things, so I took her with me. It was quite difficult to get the visit visa, but once we could prove that I was retired and living permanently in Thailand, she got the visa on the first application, but it was a process that I wouldn't wish to repeat. It was interesting showing her England, although I don't think she liked it as much as she thought she would before we arrived. The reason I wanted to mention this was because, as far as I was concerned, this relationship was going to last its course. Because of that, I wanted to show her my world, where I lived for many years before I moved to Thailand, and I thought that she would get a better understanding of me as a person, just like I liked to learn about her. After we returned, can't have been 1 week when she came to me with yet another request for more money. This time it was again related to her family, and her father, this time, had had an accident on his motorcycle. While he was okay, the motorcycle wasn't. It was completely written off because he came off at quite a high speed. And I think the fact he was actually drunk and not actually concentrating played to his advantage because he only came off with a broken arm and some bumps and bruises. But the motorcycle cost another 50,000 baht, and she came to me asking for it. That was the first time I was really annoyed when she asked for this, because how was it my problem that her father had crashed his motorcycle? I asked her, if we weren't together and you were still working in the bar, would you have had enough money just in your bank to be able to give it to him? Bear in mind the land problems beforehand and everything else. Would you have had enough money to pay it yourself? And she just looked at me and said yes, while her face said otherwise. Of course she wouldn't have been able to give it to her father, so why did she expect me to? The problem was, when I said no, it wasn't my problem, she then started to act differently almost immediately. So I reluctantly caved in on the understanding that this motorcycle would be purchased in my name and her father could use it. She said that was acceptable because we were part of the family, as she put it. So I went and bought a motorcycle, put it on my name, and had it delivered up to her village for her father to use. I'm doing this because I don't want to come across as an easy target. I don't want to eat into my principal, and while I had about 1.2 million baht in loose cash, this was for my own emergencies, and I'd already taken this down from just under 2 million baht, and I didn't want to continue spending this emergency fund for emergencies that weren't my own. She was happy and grateful that I'd purchased the bike, though in my name, and her father seemed to be grateful as well that he now had a brand new motorcycle to use. The problem I'm faced with now is that I've caved in and given her money basically any time she's asked for it, and because she changes when I don't. That was the first time I started to think that this relationship wasn't exactly what I thought it was, but I can really understand why many guys get themselves into such a bad state, because as far as they're aware, these requests aren't malicious. But I considered them to be malicious in intent, because she had no business asking for any money from me other than what we'd agreed to. Very occasional requests were one thing, and I was okay if, for example, her father crashed a bike and I bought him a new one. But that can't be only a few months after helping him to pay off a loan on the land and school fees. It all adds up to an amount of money that means I'm giving her way over what we'd agreed to in terms of a monthly allowance, which was way more than she was able to earn even when she was working in the bar. That was the thing that I don't think she understood. I wasn't there to give her more money than she could make. I was there to look after her, give her a good life, help when the circumstances required my help, but my main concern was making sure that she would be okay when I was no longer around. But I started to understand that if something happened to me and she was left with all my money, it would probably be all gone in less than a year. She'd give it away to different family members, she'd probably go out and buy a brand new car, and she'd have squandered all of it because that was in her nature. I'm just hoping, though, that she's not going to come to me again with any more demands for money because I'm not going to want to give it to her. I just really hoped that this was the case, and I told her that this is not what I planned when we were married. I was still giving her 25,000 baht every single month, and I was okay with that because we'd agreed to it. She wasn't working and she needed money to look after her family as well as herself. I expected her not to work, and therefore I had to give her this money. But that was, at the time, remember, just under 10 years ago, that was an amount of money that many office workers who had university degrees didn't earn for working all month. So the fact that she thought she should just have more than that, that was when I started to get quite concerned that this was a slippery slope to what would have been my eventual ruination if I didn't put my foot down. I was, however, open to the possibility of giving her a little bit of money if a major life event happened, and I would be the one who would determine if it was major or not. The fact that she came to me only a month after I'd already purchased that motorcycle, asking for yet more money for something else, that really ticked me off, even though I told her countless times not to even think about asking again unless it was a real emergency. The problem was, I think her version of an emergency was any time anyone in her family needed any money for absolutely anything, yet that wasn't what my definition of an emergency was. But this time, for some reason, she thought it would be a good idea to ask me for 100,000 baht because her father wanted to start a pig farm. He wanted to build the enclosure and buy a number of small pigs, as well as a few other things to go along with it. And bear in mind, I haven't received any money back from the 250,000 baht that I gave them to buy the land, or to pay off the loan on the land, should I say. And when I asked my wife about this, she just said that it's in her name, so why would they have to pay the money back? I couldn't win with her, really. But she told me that this 100,000 would be paid back because it was a new business and her father, although he was already growing rice, wanted to take on this project. I said to my wife, how about this? If I give him 100,000, I'll reduce your monthly allowance to 24,000 baht. Would that be okay with you? She said it would, so I gave the money yet again. But I noticed as soon as I handed the money over the following weeks, she was behaving in a slightly different way than she behaved before. I'm 100% convinced it was because I was giving her less money when it came to her monthly allowance. 24 instead of 25,000. And because of that, she behaved in a different way. I don't know why, but I could definitely feel it. I'd ask her now probably 5 times not to ask for any more money ever again because I'm not going to give it. But I'm still giving it to her just to keep the peace and because I can afford it without it really affecting me. But it's starting to get on my nerves, the fact that she thinks I'm just there to give her and her family money anytime it's requested. I was not there for that. I'd already spent way too much money and I'm not happy with it. But I'm still going ahead with it, and I know why all the other guys do the same thing. Because they can't stand it when their wife starts to behave in a very inappropriate manner. It makes them think that all the money that they've already invested was for nothing because she's not behaving the way she should behave anyway. So that's why they cave in and go all the way to zero. I suppose if I wasn't strong enough, that could have happened to me. But when her allowance went back to 25,000, she just changed back to normal again. Crazy, really. Things progressed as normal for the next couple of months as well, and I'm starting to think that she's finally come to the understanding that I'm not there to simply give her money anytime it's needed. Actually, scrap that, not anytime it's needed, anytime it's requested, because needs and requests are very different things. We even went up to visit her parents around this time and saw that pig farm was there in action, and he had about 40 little pigs, which weren't that little anymore, when we had a chance to see them. My wife felt proud that her father was able to have this, as well as the bike there that belonged to me and her father got to use, and also the land that I graciously paid back the loan on, which I already saw the paperwork for, and it did belong to my wife. I'm starting to feel more comfortable again in the situation, starting to think that she's finally understood that the pig farm was the last time she could ask for money, and that's when I let my guard down, just before another request was sprung upon me, and I started to relax and feel good again about my relationship. That made the next ask even harder to come to terms with. She just sprung it on me out of nowhere without any care in the world, it seemed, because no matter how many times I told her not to do it again, she still did, and that's what really hit me as being the thing I couldn't understand. And before I get into what it actually was, apart from her request for money, I am extremely happy with the relationship with her. Everything about our day-to-day life is great, and every time we go away we have a good time together. We never really argue about anything apart from this. So that's what makes this even more difficult, because it's like she's ruining what we have by asking for things from me that she shouldn't ask for. But also, I feel like I don't want to lose what I have with her because, for the most part, I am extremely happy with my relationship. This time, however, the request was the biggest yet. It was for 500,000 baht, and when she said the figure, I nearly fell off my chair. This was for another land issue, something to do with land that the family had sold approximately 5 years ago, but these people wanted to sell it again, and because it belonged to the family before, she asked if the land could be bought. It could go on her name, but that would give them more farming land, and also it would be good for her future as well. I immediately told her no way, I can't do that because that's too much money to just hand over, and as if like clockwork I can see her change. We're not talking about a drastic change, but it's the little noticeable things that she does, or should I say doesn't do anymore, that puts a strain on my own mental well-being. I need her to not ask for anything from me, for whatever reason, yet she's not getting the picture. But also, I want to stay in this relationship with her because everything else is perfect. So I ended up having to tell her I would think about it. And by me just saying that, she changed back to her old self. I was thinking about it for a few weeks, and she's always coming to me every single day asking if I've made up my mind, because they needed a decision. And initially, when I told her that I thought about it and I didn't think it was a good idea, the look on her face was that of horror. So, I had to quickly pretend I was joking, and basically because I wanted to be in this relationship with her. I was furious about it, and I think she knew, but she didn't care about my feelings, because as soon as I agreed, she was happy again, regardless of the state she saw me in, being completely aggravated about the fact that she got yet more money out of me. I'd done it again. I'd caved in and handed over yet more money to her, even though I made it clear to her so many times that I didn't want to do that. But as I've already said, I did it just to keep the peace and because I couldn't stand watching her change so considerably when I refused. That was a lot of money as well. That had to come out of my own emergency pot, which was not looking as healthy as it was before. But she's happy and completely oblivious to how upset that whole thing made me. And that's the thing though. It's as if she knows that I want to be able to maintain the status quo in the relationship, so I will do things that I don't want to do in order to be able to do that. I hadn't yet come to the determination that she was being malicious, but I wasn't far off thinking this. The relationship itself was great apart from these money requests, these unwarranted money requests, because she's getting an allowance which, as I've already said, at the time was more than many university-educated people would get simply by working a normal job. But I tried to forget about this because I don't think after asking for 500,000 baht she will ever ask again. I mean, I'm expecting more, but not for a very long time because that was a lot of money for me to give, and I thought, at least I hoped, that she would respect the fact that I gave her the money because it was a lot. The land did go onto her name, but that was only a small token of comfort because it didn't go on my name, and what was hers wasn't actually mine anyway. It was just one way for me to somehow maintain a level of control over the whole thing. Another few months passed without incident. Again, I'm starting to relax back into the relationship. I'm starting to be more comfortable, to not be constantly on guard all the time, waiting for her to ask for something else. Like last time, we went up to visit her family and saw this land, and I could understand why she wanted it back in the family, because it was right in the middle of other plots of land that they had. But even still, the fact that she thought that it was my problem confused me because it wasn't my problem at all. That land wasn't benefiting me. In fact, it hurt me, and she didn't see it that way. She placed her family and herself at a higher level of importance than me, and I couldn't understand that because I was the one with the money, therefore she should have placed me at the top. But it didn't work like that though. But I was prepared to move ahead with things, and I was starting to feel better again. Plus, that was all I wanted. It was coming up to the end of the year that we were currently in, and things were okay. I guess it was probably 2 months after I gave her the money for the land, and I wanted to go away for a holiday because we'd not been for a while. Only within Thailand and just down to the beach, and we went to Koh Chan, an island that I'd never been to before. I booked to stay there for a week at a really nice resort, and just to reset before the new year. I was loving living in Bangkok, but after a while you do feel like you need to take time away from the city and have a mental reset. I'd say it was our second to last night there. We were having a nice meal and I'm in my element. I've completely forgotten about all the money I've given away. I've completely moved ahead and I'm starting to feel really happy again. And as if she knew how happy I was feeling, she wanted to change that and get me back to being upset and angry. Why do I think like that? Because over that meal, she asked again for what she said would be the last time. Yet again, the last time. But now, because we had this land bag, that's how she put it, it would be good if her father had a tractor so that he could tend to the land a lot quicker than he was currently able to. She said it was very important. That's how she said it. It's very important that my father can have this tractor, and we really need you to buy the tractor so that he can do the work properly. My face dropped when she said that, and I think she could see I was shocked that she'd asked again, and she said before I had a chance to say anything that this would be the last time. I couldn't understand it though. It was the last time before and the time before that. How many times did she tell me she would never ask for money again? And every single time I gave it to her, saying that you can't ask again, but she still did. Without even saying anything, I walked over to one of the waitstaff and asked for the bill. I left, after he handed it to me and I gave the cash and walked out. When she realised what I was doing, she chased after me, saying she promised she would never ask again, that this was so important for the family and she really thought it would be a good thing if they had this tractor. I just completely ignored her and continued walking back to the hotel because I just couldn't bring myself to speak to her after she'd come up with yet another reason to ask for money from me. She's following behind me trying to speak to me and I'm just really upset if anything because this wasn't meant to happen again and it had. And I should mention that the tractor was going to cost about 600,000 baht, and she expected me to pay for it. Back in the hotel, she said she was sorry. She promised me she wouldn't ask for any more money, and I had to just look at her and say, I'm sorry too, but that was one request too many, and I told her I wasn't doing this anymore. I was heartbroken that she'd even asked again after everything I told her. After everything she promised, she'd asked me yet again for more money. This time, she could see how upset I was, and she said, okay, I didn't think you would be so upset. I won't ask again. I promise I won't ever ask again. I felt like she finally understood how serious I was, so I thought it was only right to give her another chance. I started feeling a bit better with her for the rest of the time on Koh Chang, and we returned to Bangkok. About 3 days after getting back from Bangkok, we were out having a meal and she started talking about the tractor again and asking for the money for it, saying she had a good idea. Maybe the tractor could go on her name so it would be like ours and her father could use it, but it would still be me giving the same amount of money away. That was when I realised that whatever I did, things would never change. And the fact that she asked me when we were in a restaurant, just like she did the last time, I think she did that because she knew I wouldn't be able to make a scene and get very angry as I would if she'd asked me if we were at home. I just looked at her and shook my head and said, "Now you've blown it, we're through." A look of horror came over her face because I wasn't shouting, I wasn't angry, I'd just had enough and there was nothing that she could do to change things. I just told her, let's talk about it when we go back home. I paid the bill without finishing the meal because I couldn't be bothered, and we went home, and I don't think she was fully understanding what was going to happen when we got back. Because when we did get back, the first thing she did was what many girls in that situation would do. She threw herself on me, thinking that somehow that would get me to give her a tractor just because she asked for it for her father. I allowed that to happen, but afterwards I just told her I'm not staying with you anymore because you keep going against everything I ask, which is don't ask for anything ever again over and above your allowance. I've caved in lots of times, and if I cave in this time, you're going to ask me again. And if I cave in then, you're going to continue to ask. And I get to the point when I have no money left, and I'm not doing it anymore. I told her that she'd ruined her chances. Everything that I could have done, everything that I had, would eventually be yours, I told her. Now it won't be. So I think it's better if you leave. She was very shocked. I don't think she was expecting that, and she kept saying she was so sorry and she wouldn't do it again. But I'd heard it all before so many times from her, and every single time it was a lie, so I knew this time would only be a lie too. Now the problem was she didn't want to leave, saying she was sorry she wouldn't do it again, so I just thought, I will leave then. So I took my most treasured possessions, which were few and far between, and put them in a bag and told her I was going to stay in a hotel. When I walked out, I still think she thought things would be okay soon and she tried to call me not long after, but I didn't respond. I was just sat there in the hotel thinking that I didn't even want to be in Thailand anymore because this was absolutely insane what was going on. Although I was married to her, there was no chance of her getting any of my stuff now because I had it invested, not even in my own country, so she'd not be able to find it. I went out that evening by myself and just thought about things long and hard. I felt upset mainly because I did still love her. I still wanted to be with her, but I didn't want to keep doing what I was doing. I knew she would never stop asking until I ran out of money. I have to go back to all the guys that lose everything. I think they were just like me, but they weren't strong enough to say no when they needed to, but I was. And the following morning I had over 100 missed calls, lots of messages saying she was sorry and she wouldn't do it again, and she asked me to go back to the room. I knew I needed to, so I went back, and she thought everything was back to normal. Again, she threw herself on me, saying how sorry she was, but I didn't believe her. I told her to get off me, and I wanted to work everything out because I'm not staying with you anymore. I've already come to the decision, and no matter what you do, we're through. I thought about it the previous night, and I said to her, you've got two choices. Either I leave right now and you can sort everything out yourself and you get nothing, or we go and get divorced and I'll give you 250,000 baht and then I will leave. She was now in hysterics. She was crying, saying how sorry she was and she wouldn't do it again, but she was unable to answer why she had done it so many times before. Why did you keep saying she wouldn't do it again and you kept doing it again? I told her I've made my mind up and there's nothing going to change. You've got two choices. That was when she started shouting at me and hitting me, saying that I was a bad man. Only 2 minutes before, she apologised for asking for all that. Now I'm a bad man for not giving in. I told her I'll leave again, and if I haven't heard anything from you with disregard in 2 days, I will choose for you and you'll get nothing. I walked out again and she went from angry back to sad, saying please don't go, but I left because I couldn't take it anymore. I just went to another hotel and wondered if she would see sense. She called me not long after, saying again that she was sorry, but I just hung up on her. And she called back asking why you hang up on me. I want to say sorry, I'm sorry you, she said. I hung up again. But before I did, I said I've already told you you've got two choices, which one do you want? I didn't hear from her again until the following morning, and get this, she said, "Why you know by tractor for family, it very important." That's when I said to her, "I'm giving you right now to decide. 250,000 or nothing. Which one do you want? I want you by tractor, and then I will never ask again." Unbelievable. All I could do was hang up the phone because I had already come to the decision I was leaving Thailand as quickly as I could because I couldn't stand this nonsense anymore. That very day, I went to the bank where my retirement visa money was and I withdrew it in cash. I took out some of the other cash in the bank I had in Thailand and exchanged everything for US dollars. Then I had to think about the things in the room. I wanted to go and get the things that mattered to me, although I had most of them with me already. I still had a few items of clothing, but then I thought, sod it. I don't care about them, and I quickly thought about where I wanted to go. She was trying to call me and I wasn't answering, sending messages and again I wasn't answering. So I just made my way to the airport and decided that I was going to go to the Philippines because that was one of the countries I was researching long before I came to the decision of breaking off the relationship with her. I flew that same day to the Philippines and I haven't looked back. I don't know what my wife did over the previous years. I assume we're not married anymore, but we still could be. But I don't care, because I gave her chance after chance after chance, until it got to the point where I understood that I couldn't give her any more chances, because there would always be one more time. Always one more request, and that would always be something that wouldn't change about her. Our relationship, apart from that, was everything that I would have wanted a relationship to be. But if I was still with her now, I wouldn't be with her now because I would have run out of money, because I would have given it all to her. That's how so many guys lose everything in Thailand, because they don't have the control and the mental ability to look out for themselves. They allow their money to go to zero because the alternative at the time sounds worse. I can promise you, there's nothing worse than losing all your money. The Philippines has been good to me. I just have casual relationships, and that's how I've done it since then, because, funnily enough, it makes things a lot easier. You would think that by committing to someone and loving someone and getting married to someone, you would think they would want less from you than someone you're having a casual relationship with because you're fully supporting them on a daily basis. But it doesn't work like that. I learned a lesson. It cost me a lot of money, but it didn't break me or ruin me, and I haven't made any similar mistakes since. You have been warned.